presently a member of the City of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County Ethics Board. He is a proud graduate of the Wilberforce University of Wilberforce, Ohio, where he majored in elementary education. He's also attained a master's degree in education and a principal's license and completion of the postgraduate studies from Cardinal Stritch University. He has served in education at MATC, at the Milwaukee Public Schools, and the principal of the Cornerstone Achievement Academy. He is a proud husband of Dr. Gloria J. Pitchford Nicholas, and father of 4 and a grandfather of 7. So let's welcome Mr. Clarence Nicholas.
Is there a problem with sound?
Yeah, he's having a problem with sound off and on.
Mr. Nicholas, are you able to maybe connect by phone?
Can somebody write a note and put it on screens and maybe he can see it? Mr. Nicholas? I'll put it in chat.
Okay.
Here he is. Maybe we can then, Madam Chair, maybe we can just go on to our next guest. Maybe Jason, would you be ready?
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you just well.
Okay. Yeah, I think you just gave me the ability to share the PowerPoint. So can you all see that?
Yeah, can we introduce you?
Oh, yeah.
It is my great honor.
Hey.
Introduce State Representative Jason Fields.
I can't do nothing.
Jason was born in Milwaukee. He's a graduate of Milwaukee Lutheran High School. You got
no one can hear anything, so somebody's on the
Nicholas is talking now.
Cell phone mute. I can't hear you.
And Mr. Nicholas, we can hear you.
Did you look at the emails? Because I sent everything to you.
You might want to mute him.
Mr. Nicholas is on the phone. Can you mute him, Hetty?
I just did. Okay.
Thank you.
What'd you say, Pastor?
I said, as you guys were also, you were the Red Knights, weren't you?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Well, go Knights. He's obtained a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Management from Cardinal Stritch University. He's a certified financial education instructor, former stockbroker, investment banker, and business owner. He was elected to the Wisconsin Assembly. His first tenure there was from 2004 to 2010. He was reelected in 2016, and he's now decided that he's going to leave and pursue other things. And so he's been very active in our community on a lot of different issues. And I don't think that we could have anybody better to talk about the importance of election, especially this election. State Representative Jason Fields.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm going to, you all can see this, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me just, so let me go back. Give me a second here, just, here we go. So thank you for asking me to be a part of this. These are the kinds of discussions that I love to do, love to be a part of it. And so I know many of you all, we are family. And so to give you this, and let me start my clock because I want to make sure I adhere to the 20 minutes. You know, y'all know you give a politician and a pastor a microphone, we'll go on forever. I came about this as if I was presenting to people who would ask me the question, why is it important to vote? Because I don't think we do a good job, this myself included, of helping people answer that question as to why it's important. And so that's how I wanted to come across and make this presentation to you all. And so the first thing I want to say is, you all are listening, there are 4 things that I want you to remember that I think is very vital and key to when we talk about this. Number 1, voting is about power. It's about who gets it, it's about who wields it and who uses it, and it's about who distributes it. So number 1,
Come on now. I had that. Okay.
voting is about power.
Now I can hear. I got it fixed. Okay.
Okay. Number 2, if you're not at the table, you probably on the menu. So number 2, if you're not at the table, you probably on the menu. Number 3, if voting wasn't important, if it did not work, then why are they trying so hard to keep people from doing it? So number 3, if voting wasn't important, if it did not work, then why are they trying so hard to keep people from doing it? Number 4, and then we'll get into this. If I can make you think what I want you to think, then I can control you. If I can make you think what I want you to think, then I can control you. So with that said, and Keith mentioned this what's at stake. And so I want to go down just a number of items as I begin to hit on all those points as to what's at stake and why it's important. And number 1, we need to understand that whether you vote or don't vote, that's a vote. So whether you vote for somebody or whether you don't vote for somebody, that is a vote. What do I mean by that? A lot of people may not like the choices now, right? You may not be thrilled about who you got. But let's say you say, you know what? I'm not voting for Joe Biden. Well, whether you like it or not, that's a vote for Donald Trump. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I am telling you the game and how this stuff goes down and how it's played. So let's talk about what's at stake. Number 1, the census. The census every 10 years, if we don't do a job and have everybody start report what happens, and I'm gonna point to a slide to this, what happens is the people who get the most votes get, as I told you before, it's about power. So when the census comes and we don't do a good job of making sure everybody completes it, fills it out, guess who gets to make the decisions about how much money our communities get? 9 times out of 10 is people who may not like or care for the stuff that we care about. In fact, the current administration said they're going to put on hold gathering information and data for the census, meaning they're going to stop collecting that. So what happens if I stop, if that's, let's say there's 100 people, just to keep the math simple, there's 100 people, I stopped at 20. That means you don't get the money that you deserve. Policies that impact diversity initiatives. People who vote for people who can take diversity initiatives away or who can instill diversity initiatives. Case in point, earlier when I was in the legislature years ago, when Jim Doyle was a Democrat, we had policies. You got to have so much minority participation. You got to have certain diversity. When people voted and Scott Walker came in, guess what he did? Did away with all of that. The current administration now, and I'm gonna show you a slide, hey, we don't have to follow diversity initiatives, meaning we don't need to understand culture. We don't need to understand, all this stuff. We don't need to understand minorities, people of color. We don't need to understand that. Women's health, criminal justice reform, Supreme Court nominations. You all see we're dealing with that now. When you vote or don't vote, you are saying, or you're giving either your authorization of power to who's going to be sitting in the Supreme Court. Now, there are some things that are going out now where, and I got to talk to you all about the personal stuff, not for me, but just from just involved in politics. There's a commercial or there's a video of one of the Republican senators saying how when Obama wanted to appoint, I think it was Merrick Garland, all these people were saying, nope, you ought to wait for the next election. You ought to wait for the next president. Same scenario, same situation. Now now, guess who's singing a different song? All the people who said this is what you should do now singing a different tune, saying, nope, we need to rush this stuff through. So when we don't vote for people, that's a vote somewhere. Your health care, your rights to vote, education, Social Security, what happens to that? One of my personal topics, financial institution policy. When you don't vote for people, did you all know that every financial institution organization, for the most part, have to fulfill what we call these community reinvestment acts, meaning there are dollars that are supposed to flow from that financial institution into the targeted areas or demographics where they're located. If you don't vote for certain people, who's enforcing that? I just saw a report that said 80%, there was an 80% decrease from SBA loans in the Black community, meaning Black folks, Black businesses are not getting loans. That has decreased by 80%. So if there were 10 people getting loans now it's only 2. And then taxes. Now, here's where I want you all to understand, and I want to bring it all together, right? This is where I don't think we do a good job in explaining the power moves, the things that occur based on whether you vote or not vote. Because remember I said, whether you vote or don't vote, you vote. Let's start in the middle. And can you all see this here? Can you see my cursor moving?
Yes.
Now, remember I told you all that voting is about power. My third premise was if voting wasn't important, then why they fighting so hard to keep you from doing it? So let me connect all these headlines that you see that have to do with all of us here in the city of Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin. So voter suppression is a lot of confusion that happens. And so if I start getting a bunch of Black folks saying, hey, you know what, voting don't work, all this stuff, y'all don't need to know this stuff. If I start doing other things that I think it's going to get touched on, I think Anita's going to touch on it as well. If I start making it difficult for you to go vote and you don't go do it, guess who gets to keep their power? So when we say voter suppression is done in a number of ways. It's not just, oh, I want to make it hard for you to vote. It's done legally. So voter suppression, we all saw in this past April how many people didn't get their ballots, how many people requested it. And if I don't have to if I know in the city of Milwaukee, just to show you your chess game, if I know in the city of Milwaukee that you typically vote for a certain party or a certain group, well, if I make it harder and there's a Supreme Court justice on the ballot and I make it harder for you all to vote, then guess what? In my areas where people gonna vote and I know who they gonna vote for, that helps me. So this whole big thing about this pandemic, all of this stuff started coming into play. Now I want you to look at, before I go to my next slide, I want you to look at this picture here, this photo here, because this is what this stuff is about. You all can see that, correct?
Yes.
So the red is Republican, the blue is Democrat. This right here is 2008. When people don't feel like they census, and follow my cursor, census meaning that the people in power get to draw the maps, the people in power get to distribute the money, the people in power get to distribute who else is going to wield power. So the census, who we voting for, all comes back to this here. So if you look in this 2008, look at this blue here. Now look at 2012. All the red is Republican, all the blue is Democrat. So you can see when you don't vote, items like the census, power plays, guess what happens? The other side wins. And I've said this before, whether you vote for somebody or not vote for somebody, you vote. So this is what this comes to. Fast forward, now we in this pandemic. Here you see, and I'm gonna use a bunch of different things. Before I go to this, let's look here. Remember I told you all that when you vote, the census, when you don't vote, I talked to you all about diversity initiatives that have to do with respecting cultures, respecting other people. We all know there's a huge need for that. But when we don't vote and people get empowered, guess what happens? Federal workers forced to attend seminars on white privilege and microaggressions, which, with all due respect, they need to be attending some of this stuff. Wisconsin ain't just ranked the #1 segregated state for a reason. We not ranked the #1 most equitable or unequitable state just because. It's a reason for all this stuff. So when people in power say, you know what, we want to keep things the way it is, hey, this is what we do. Y'all don't need to go to these classes. You don't need to understand this stuff. People in power, the current administration, can say, I don't want federal workers, if you're getting federal dollars, to have to attend classes like that. I don't want you to have to understand how to deal with other cultures. That's on the federal level. The census. Remember I said, if you don't vote, we don't start collecting the numbers and the data. They get to decide your schools, how much money, local public policy, all these things they get to decide on gets affected. So to break it down on a state level, and I want you to get this, here's what happened. If you look and you pay attention to what's happening, you'll hear the headlines and data all the time. These people are suing Governor Evers. They're suing this. Everybody is suing somebody. I'm gonna show you how this comes into connection. Now, I want you to read this. Voss and Fitzgerald are suing to open Wisconsin for business, saying it's safe. Yet, they moved their conference from May 15th to July 10th. Now, I want you to follow this. Wisconsin is not safe. In fact, we are a red spot. We are a hot zone for this. Now, when it was affecting the African-American community, guess what was happening? Did nobody care? Hey, it's safe. Now that it's starting to affect other communities, you want to know what? They don't want us to, they want to keep saying it's safe. You want to know why they want to keep saying it's safe? Because they need people to continue to come out, vote, and feel good. Because if they continue to get their people out to vote, guess what? They get to keep this. Now, let's talk about some of the stuff on the city level. And here's where, y'all, I'm going to get a little personal. Please, this is not about me losing an election and none of that, but I do want to point some stuff out to you. When we don't vote. Many of you may have known I've ran for the chief financial officer for the city of Milwaukee. I'm here. This is the article I'm about to go to. Now, when the pandemic came out, there was the Republicans sued, a bunch of people sued, a certain group, the mayor and all these folks, a lot of people had a lot of stuff in play. So that's why you didn't see a whole bunch of people fighting for this stuff. Because think about it, the city of Milwaukee went from 180 voting locations to 5. Madison had more than that. Brown Deer had more voting locations than that. When I tell you this stuff is about power, this is exactly what it's about. And sometimes power ain't just being exercised on the Republican side. There are a bunch of people, Democrats included, that when it's time for them to stay in power, they will do just that. Which is why I always tell people I'm black first. So $8.6 million. The person that just won this chief financial officer, this is a recent article, you all. This is, did y'all even hear about this?
Probably
Did y'all
not.
even say that again?
Probably not. I doubt it if I heard anything.
Right. So y'all didn't even hear about the fact that the chief financial officer for the city of Milwaukee, who was just elected, made an $8.6 million mistake. This y'all money. This our money. Now, here's where I get ticked off, you all. If that would have been me, my face would have been on the Journal Sentinel every day for at least 2 weeks. But nobody know about this. Nobody said anything. The same folk who voted for her, quiet. $8.6 million of taxpayer dollars on a mistake. And when asked about it, the response was, oh, I didn't know. Although you're the #2 person. Now, let's look at a different positive example of why it's important to vote. We just had the first African-American county executive elected, my good friend, Representative David Crowley, now County Executive Crowley. What was the first thing he said he wanted to do? Equity, racism, all these things are priorities for me. And one of the first things he did was say, I'm going to help, and here's where I'm at. Instead of us getting kicked out, people getting evicted, I'm going to put up $10 million program to help people through the eviction foreclosure to not lose their place of where they live at. So there's a difference. Who you voting for matters. Now let's go back to this because I got 5 minutes. and I'm gonna go back to the suppression of vote stuff because I think you wanted me to hit on this. Now, this is here. During this whole season, this pandemic, all this stuff, there was discussion and talks about opening up the Pfizer Stadium and the Milwaukee Brewers Stadium. Now, mind you, all over the world, all over the country and other places, people are opening up stadiums left and right saying, hey, we want to come and vote. We want to make sure you can come and vote. This was took off the table. The reason why it was took off the table is because certain people are afraid that if this is done, regardless of the fact that this is a good idea, our current mayor, I ain't got nothing personal against them. This is right on the website. You all can go on the city website and see this. And listen, I'm not personally attacking anybody. All I'm saying is that the rationale, the reason given was because if they did this, made it easier for us to go and vote, there will be a lawsuit. Now, here's where voting is important. You got to have people who got some courage. Because guess what? Republicans are going to sue regardless. I was on the phone with some people from DC and New York, and they were telling me the game plan. They said, Jason, here's what's going to happen. And so you all mock my words when you see it occur. If we are voting and the lines are open at 8 o'clock, you all know that if you were in line at 8 o'clock, you get to continue to vote as long as you are in at 8 o'clock. Word on the street between a lot of the powers that be is that if you have people in line, even at 8 o'clock, if those people still get a chance to vote, Republicans gonna sue. So if that's the case, if you're gonna get sued, you might as well get sued for something. Don't just give in because you're afraid of what's gonna happen here.
Mhm.
And that's what we're dealing with. Now, and this is my last slide. I told you all, voting is about power. If you're not at the table, you probably on the menu. Number 3, if voting wasn't that important, then why are they trying so hard to keep people from doing it? And when people say it doesn't make a difference, yes, it does. Whether you vote or don't vote, you are voting, and your action, whether you vote or don't vote, makes a difference because it does have an impact. Case in point, in April, you all, April's pandemic going from 180 locations in the city of Milwaukee to just 5. Do you all not know we lost 50% of African-American voters? To hit it closer to home to you all, I lost that comptroller's race by 900 some votes. Y'all, I know 900 people personally who didn't vote for me. So this should show you that this is about power. And so this is what's at stake, and Keith mentioned it. This is what's at stake, whether you like the people chosen or not. If we do not do a good job of telling people whether you vote or don't vote, you are committing to something to happen, then we are not playing the game well. Because if a person if they can control us to make you feel like, it don't matter anyway, that means they are winning because that's their message. And when I say they, I'm talking about anybody who don't want Black people to vote because it threatens their power structure. And I'm gonna shut up. 20 minutes on the dot.
Thank you. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you, Jason. And we'll have at the end of the presentations a Q&A session. And so if you want to ask questions, you can also go into the chat And you can just go and type in your question there too. With that said, Brother Nicholas, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We introduced you earlier. So it's a great honor to introduce Mr. Clarence Nicholas. Good morning. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Go ahead. It's you.
Oh, okay. So I'm with the NAACP. My name is Clarence P. Nicholas. I'm the first vice president for the NAACP here in Milwaukee. The mission of the NAACP is to ensure political, educational, social, economic equality to all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. Civil rights activist Medgar Evers, he was our first state field secretary, and he lived in Mississippi. He was the organizer for voter registration. As you know, in 1963, he was assassinated. Medgar left us with some words of wisdom. You can kill a man, but you can't kill an idea. If you don't like what the Republicans do, we need to get in there and change it. And he also said, our only hope is to control the vote. Now, I'm a native of Charlottesville, Virginia. Many of you probably heard of Charlottesville in the news. I grew up there, and the things that Jason was talking about, I saw from an early age. I came to Milwaukee in 1970. So I had time to understand what it was like for races. We call them white, well, different names. I don't want to call, I don't want to use a dirty name, but we knew that they suppressed the vote. For instance, that was the time when my parents were trying to vote and they had jelly beans in a jar. They asked my dad, could you count the number of jelly beans in the jar? And he said, how can I do it without emptying the jar? And they said, well, you can't vote. So things like that, voter suppression he was talking about. But if we go back early and we look at our history, we remember stony the road we trod, bitter the chasten rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Now this is James Weldon Johnson. It was a poem, but his brother name was John Rosen Johnson, and he put that poem to music. So we call it the Black National Anthem. I said that because James Weldon Johnson was our first secretary for the NAACP. So you're going to see I'm going to do a lot of history. He was our first secretary. And as we see, NAACP is the oldest civil rights organization in the United States. But we have what was called the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, that are called also Civil Rights Amendments or Civil War Amendments. And they came about right after the Civil War. So the 13th Amendment is interesting. It says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the United States or any territories thereof, but there's an except, and this is written, you can read it. A person is tried, duly convicted of a crime and put in jail. Now we know we have a lot of felons and we have people in jail that really shouldn't be there. However, the Constitution except clause is still there. And we're hoping that we can fight to remove that clause. But you also look at the fact that there were literacy tests. They equate now to voter suppression, voter ID. Then there were poll tax, same thing, voter suppression. And if you were unable to pay fees with the poll tax, you could not vote. So then we look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We know that Lyndon Baines Johnson signed that Voting Rights Act in 1965. And the signing of it was to prevent African Americans from not being able to exercise their vote as it was with certain states and locales, causing them not to be able to vote. Now we're still fighting for that act to have full implementation. We know that John Lewis has been instrumental, or had been instrumental, in trying to make sure that that act is carried forth. Now we go back and we look at the act and we see that men like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, SCLC, Roy Wilkins, NAACP, Whitney Young, Urban League, they were all present when that act was signed. They're gone now, but they were fighting to make sure that we were able to vote. Then we have what is called now voter IDs. We have what Fields just stated, removing certain names from voter registration in certain states, Milwaukee being one of those states, steering people from voting places, closing voting polls early, and not having enough voting sites. Now, key messages for today. Our president, Derrick Johnson, national president of the NAACP, stated, we need to elect officials who will appoint police commissioners and run the criminal justice system so that African-American communities are benefiting from those particular policies and procedures that they choose to enact. We know that our children here in the Milwaukee Public Schools are not receiving their fair and adequate share of resources. So we need to elect officials or elected officials whose priority, number one priority, should be to make sure that our schools are properly financed. But let me go with the schools and what has happened in reference to what Mr. Fields said about power. Here's something I know for a fact. I grew up with this, but I was in my second year in college, 1967. The choice. Here we have, it's called Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. It was outlawed in Brown 2. Brown has not come here yet. Brown 1 or 2. Choice had what is called green factors. So if you did not have what is called a unitary system, and that system had to be completely diverse. For instance, your staff, your transportation, all things had to be diverse. An affirmative action plan that allowed for the ratio that has not looked like what it should. For instance, our ratio in 1970, you had 9 white teachers to 1 African-American teacher. It now has widened to 16 white teachers to 1 Black teacher. So that affirmative action plan that should have been in place, which should now be called a diversity plan, is not in place. We also have Obama, 2015, Every Student Succeeds Act. It replaced No Child Left Behind. And yet we're still not getting the resources and dollars that go along with that particular act. But that act also started in 1965. It was called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So the names have changed from Elementary and Secondary Education Act, No Child Left Behind, Every Student Succeeds Act, but it's Title I dollars. It's always been Title I dollars. So the Title I funding for our children is not being funded fairly. However, they use a formula that if students were receiving free lunch, they would get full Title I dollars to their schools. Now you know that most of Milwaukee students are receiving free lunch. So where are the dollars? And they're saying we're short. We don't have enough money. So it's like Mr. Fields said again, those dollars come with power. Then we have people who are not supposed to be authorizing the choice programs. For instance, the city of Milwaukee, they have choice programs. Why? When we don't have what is called diversity, or the old way of saying it, integration. But they have choice program that was outlawed in 1967. Now it went to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, and it was given a stay. It was called a stay, but we had African Americans and we had Scott Walker to lift the stay. The stay is still unlawful. It should have stayed. Now it moved from 15,000 to probably 30,000 kids. Those schools now having been hit with the pandemic, those children that are in choice schools cannot get the necessary technology that just some of the MPS schools are getting. Most of the MPS schools do not have the technology that they should have had in their schools, and the schools are not technologically ready because those kinds of technologies that should have been there were never put there. So now we face a crisis. When our children return back to school, they were behind. There were a gap before they left. The gap has widened. What do? We need all kinds of organizations, churches, and people to volunteer for tutorial services to help our children get somewhat back on track. But then the pipeline from school to prison, that's in what is called the Every Student Succeeds Act, and that has yet to be put in force, so it hasn't been curbed, and our students are still going to prison in large numbers. So it's a pipeline from school to prison, and it's been that way since 1986. So we have what? Our November 3rd election. As all other elections, carries with it 5 or more years of consequences. So if we don't get out and vote, then for the next 5 years or more, the consequences are going to be what? As Dr. King talked about, 1, we have 5 essentials that make a healthy society. Those are education, employment, healthcare, housing, and social justice. Now, Dr. King made it clear, if one of those 5 is missing, you do not have a healthy community or society. We here in Wisconsin, Milwaukee proper, are fighting for all 5 so that we can get what? A healthy community or healthy communities. Now, on October 20th, that's Tuesday, we have the NAACP branches across the state that are partnering with Barbara Amwan, Esquire, Darrell Jones, Esquire, Yolanda Cody, Senator Taylor, BWO voter partners, and more to march and have a caravan from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King statue on Martin Luther King Drive, lining up at 10:45 a.m. John Lewis Good Trouble March, and there will be a press conference at 11 a.m. The march route will carry us from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Drive on up to Vale Phillips Avenue, or Lane. And then from Vale Phillips north to Clinton Rose Center. On October 24th, 2020, the Good Trouble March, John Lewis and Carol Van, will take place in Madison, Wisconsin. So we need people to also be there to show your voice in the sense of every voice count, show yourselves, be active, and join with us for Good Trouble. All right, so that's all I have. So I'll be prepared to answer questions if there are any.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nicholas. And we want to thank Representative Fields, a person who's really on the grounds in terms of the nuts and bolts of either voter registration, voter participation, is Ms. Anita Johnson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. For those who do not know, Anita Johnson has been a Wisconsin Voter ID Coalition Coordinator for voter riders since 2015. She's a key member of the Souls to the Polls leadership, and she participates in training volunteers, participating churches to canvass their neighborhoods with information about voter ID and voter registration. Souls to the Polls is an organization that unites ministers and their congregations in Milwaukee Central City to strengthen the voting power of the Black community. This group was established in 2013. And so with that said, Ms. Anita Johnson.
Thank you. Today, I will attempt to talk about some of the things that we generally don't talk about voter registration. I will also touch on photo ID and how to get a state ID if you never had one in Wisconsin. So let's start with photo ID. If you never had a Wisconsin state ID, you do need one to vote. You can go to the DMV and tell the clerk that you need a state ID to vote. You need to take your birth certificate, proof of residence, and at least know your social security number. It's a good idea to take your social security card with you. There are other things that you can take, but these three documents are generally what people take to the DMV, and they will do if that's what you have to take to the DMV. There is no charge for this as long as you tell them, I need this to vote. And when you fill out the information, fill out the application, there's a little box there that you can check that says, I need this to vote. There was a time at the DMV that you could get this temporary document the day you applied for it. Now they mail it to you because they feel that people are just coming there because they want an ID. This is only a temporary ID. If the election happens within a couple of days, then they will overnight the ID to you. Stamped on the bottom of that temporary ID, it says, for voting purposes only. The ID is only good for 90 days. And it used to be for 180 days, but the laws change. And this is something we don't do. We don't keep up with the changes in the voting laws and how it will affect us. The 180 days used to cover all of the elections, but the 80 days don't. So if your temporary ID runs out and there's another election, you can go back to the DMV and renew it for the next elections that are coming up. If you don't have a birth certificate, there is a petition process that you can follow. Ask the clerk for the petition form, fill it out, and the DMV will verify your place of birth and your birth date. Once that has been verified, then you will get a state ID mailed to you. Then we will go on to voter registration. you must have a current state photo ID or a driver's license to register to vote in the state of Wisconsin. October 14th has passed, but that was the last day that you could register to vote online. You can still register to vote in the following ways. You can go to your municipal clerk's office up until October 30th at 5 p.m. to vote there. Or you can vote on election day or at early vote. You can register there, but you must bring proof of residence. The law has changed. You used to be able to live in your residence for 10 days. Now it is changed to 28 days. If you have lived in your residence for 27 days or less, go back to your old polling site and vote. This is another form of voter suppression, clear and simple. Do not be suppressed when you go. Just go back to your old polling site. This is legal. I'm not telling you to do anything that is illegal. Go back to your old polling site and vote. All voters, again, must have proof of residence. A proof of residence is where the voter lives. A photo ID proves who you are. Now, when you go to the polls to vote, they ask you for your name and your address. If they find your name on the roster, this proves that you are a registered voter. Then they ask for your photo ID. When they look at your photo ID, they're looking at your face, your name, and the expiration date on your photo ID. We now can change our address online. So the poll worker is not to compare the address on your ID to the address that's listed where you registered to vote. Because we can't change it online. You don't have to go to the DMV just to change your address. You cannot trace your voter registration online. I saw that question come up. What you can do is trace your absentee ballot. There was another step after you registered to vote. There's a certificate at the end, once you have completed everything and you're a registered voter, that certificate can be printed out. And when you go to the polls to vote, if they say to you, your name is not on the roster, you can show that certificate and say, yes, I voted, and here's the certificate to prove that I have voted. In order to get an absentee ballot, you have to be a registered voter. A voter must, we talked about the 28 days. All voters can request an absentee ballot be mailed to them for any reason. A person must be a registered voter before they request an absentee ballot. To request an absentee ballot, you can go to www.myvote.wi.gov. You must provide a photo ID with that request for an absentee ballot. Anyone with a Wisconsin state ID or a driver's license already has the ID required to accompany your request for an absentee ballot. There are 3 types of absentee ballot. First, there is the temporary absentee ballot. I'm going out of town, I want to vote, I will request an absentee ballot be sent to my home. The Election Commission will send the absentee ballot to me one time. I will vote and I will mail my absentee ballot back. Then number 2, there is the in-person absentee voting. That is early vote. Early vote starts October 20th through November 1st. You still have to show an ID when you go to early vote, and you still have to provide an ID when you request an absentee ballot. The third absentee ballot is the permanent absentee ballot. If you are disabled, if you're 20 years old with lupus, if you have COVID-19, you don't know if you're going to be able to move from day to day, you can request a permanent absentee ballot. Once you request a permanent absentee ballot, the Election Commission will send you a ballot for each and every election. They will only stop when you stop using the absentee ballot. They will send you a letter and say, if you don't use the next absentee ballot, we no longer will send you any more absentee ballots. So and you don't need a doctor's excuse to get a permanent absentee ballot. Just don't abuse the privilege of being able to get an absentee ballot. Of course, if you're indefinitely confined, it is appropriate for you to request an absentee ballot. But I want you to be very careful, because you do not need to send a photo ID for a permanent absentee ballot. I'll repeat that. You do not need to send an ID for a permanent absentee ballot. You always have to have a witness sign the ballot for you, and they will put their name and their address. With the permanent absentee ballot, the signature of your witness is enough to say that this is the person that filled out the absentee ballot. There are ways of returning your absentee ballot. Please remember that you need to witness the signature and the address on the ballot. You can return the absentee ballot by mail, or you can use the drop boxes that have been provided in front of all Milwaukee public libraries. The ballots are picked up daily, and this is very safe. You cannot return an absentee ballot at your polling site on election day. I'm going to repeat that. You cannot return an absentee ballot to your polling site on election day. If you want to vote in person, do not bring that absentee ballot with you. Your ballot must be in the hands of the clerk by November 3rd. Your ballot must be in the hands of the clerk by November 3rd. Actually, the last day that you can request an absentee ballot is October 30th. But just think about it. That is not enough time for you to request an absentee ballot. They mail it to you, and then you mail it back. So if you're going to request an absentee ballot, do it now. Don't wait until October 30th to do this, because you'll never get it back in time. Early vote starts October 20th through November 1st. The following sites are open from 8 a.m. in the morning until 7 p.m. in the evening, Monday through Friday. Saturdays and Sundays, they're open from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And they are the Frank Ziegler Building, 841 North Broadway, Midtown Center, 5700 West Capitol Drive, and the Zablocki Library, 3501 West Oklahoma Avenue. Then there are the other sites that will be open are the Bayview Library, the Cannon Park Pavilion, Clinton Rose, the East Library, Good Hope Library, Martin Luther King Library, the Mitchell Street Library, Tippecanoe Library, the Village Square, Washington Park, and Zablocki Library. Now, these sites are only open from 7 a.m. to 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they're open from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, they're open from 10 a.m. to 4. I want to talk just a bit about, we have a lot of people coming into Milwaukee that are registering people on the street. And I'm finding that this has not been a good thing because people are not changing address for voters. I've had several calls where people told me I was in front of Pick and Save, and this man said he was registering me to vote. And then I got a letter from the Election Commission that said I was not a registered voter because my address did not match the address at the DMV. Voter registration is over, but in the future, know that if you have moved, and there's a lot of people that move a lot, know that you have to change that address before you register to vote. So I was able to assist the woman in changing her address. You change your address first, and then you register yourself to vote. If you got married, you have to go to the Social Security office and change your Social Security card first. Then you go to the DMV and get a new ID with your proof of marriage, proof of address, and your Social Security card. Then you register to vote. So these are all tricky things that we need to know. And usually the general public is not aware of these changes. This is the reason why we need to get out where we are out in the public as much as we can to let people know about the changes in the voting laws, but they don't always listen until it's time to go to polls to vote. If you moved after October 6th and on, go back to your old polling site and vote, because you don't have 28 days that you are in the residence. If you're living with your mama and you're moving out on October 30th, go back to your old polling site to vote. I don't know how much plainer I can say that. And that is it, unless there are questions. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. That was a lot of information. I think it's important. There are some questions that's been part of the chat, and I don't know, Anita, some of those questions were directed to you.
Okay, that's fine.
If you just go down, if you want me to read it, but let me do this. Jason did. There was a question about whether or not the mayor could arbitrarily change voting locations. And Jason, you responded to that?
Yeah.
I guess my question was, did the mayor change those polling locations, or were they changed by the election commission?
Yeah, he doesn't necessarily, or he can't change them. The election commission has the responsibility of changing them and working with the state elections commission. And so the city election, every municipal clerk, whether it's the city, whatever, they have the responsibility and authority to add or change locations. What happened was, and it's weird, is that when you look around, when we went from 180 to 5, it's sort of a hard pill to swallow because Milwaukee is the largest district in the state. But when you look at the fact that Madison still had, 20 something polling places, Brown Deer had, I think, maybe 3 or 4. And so when you look at it, it's sort of like, well, what was the rationale for going from 180 to just 5? And so I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do see where it's beneficial for a lot of folks. And since I know most of you, I mean, let's be honest, whether you was voting for Lena Senator Taylor or not, the idea that you go from 180 voting polling locations to just 5, and when you looked at where they were at, I mean, if you look at the data, like I said before, most areas in the African-American wards, aldermanic districts, lost 50%. So you literally went from, let's say you had 1,000 voters in Ashanti Hamilton district, you literally only have 500 people voting now. So you multiply that by, I think you got 5, 6 African-American elected officials. I mean, you literally lost 50% of African-American voters. Did that benefit the mayor? Yeah. I mean, let's be candid. Yeah. Were some Black folks still gonna vote for him anyway? Yes. But he appoints the election commissioner, but that election commission has the responsibility and the say so to open or close those sites. Now, here's another issue, and you all should know there was some infighting between the governor and the mayor's camp, because the governor at the time said, listen, if you're having issues, we will give you some National Guard individuals to go and help and volunteer at these sites. Not to mention, there's a lot of people who said they called the election commission to volunteer, but never got a call back. So when we talk about voter suppression is done by anybody who will benefit from keeping themselves in power.
All right. Let's see. There was something that Patrice had posted in the chat. It says that poll workers should only check photo, name, and expiration date of ID. But I thought that even if the ID, like your driver's license, is expired, if it's still your address, it still can be used. Am I correct, Anita?
No, you're not correct, because you can use different documents for photo ID that don't show your address, like a passport, a veteran's card. If you're a member of a native tribe that's recognized in the state of Wisconsin, you can use that. So your address does not play a part in your photo ID.
So you can use an expired driver's license?
You can, yes, if it's after the last general election, you can use that expired driver's license.
Okay. There's something else here too. There is this possibility of litigation or people at the polls checking. I guess this would really get into a very involved operation. But in the state of Wisconsin, can they challenge, if I have my ID, will they match the signature that I signed in order to get my ballot with the signature that I used to register to vote?
That's against the law. They are not to challenge you on your signature. They are to look at your face, your name, and the expiration date. That is all they're supposed to look at. No, you do not, they can't challenge you on a signature.
You mentioned, Anita, that you should not take, if you requested an absentee ballot, you should not take it to on November the 3rd to the polling place.
Right.
My question is, though, you can take that ballot to the early voting places. Am I correct?
No.
Yeah,
There are two places you could take those absentee ballots. One is the drop box and one is mailing. You do not take it to early voting. They are equipped to take the people who come in and early vote. You cannot take.
They allowed me to turn my ballot in.
Oh, they did?
At an early.
I could be wrong. But as far as I know, I could be wrong. And I'll admit to that.
Basically.
Because we haven't started early vote yet. So when did they take it?
Yeah, they did take mine because I did that for the vote in April.
Okay, that was a different scenario, Keith. They were allowing you to do it then. I don't believe they're allowing you to do it now. They have the drop boxes in lieu of the taking it to early vote. The drop boxes are right in front of the libraries.
But Zeidler is one of those early voting sites, and that they will have a drop box there, correct?
They do, yes.
I just know they allowed me to do it in April. I don't know why it would be different in November.
Well, the circumstances were different. We didn't have enough polling sites,
Okay.
right? We're talking about April 7th?
No, I didn't do it on April 7th. I did it prior to April 7th. I early voted, and I went in. My wife, no, this is what happened. My wife dropped hers off. I made a mistake on my ballot, so I went in and I did another one because
Okay.
no,
Okay.
wait, I didn't take that ballot with me. I requested, but my wife was able to drop hers off.
Okay.
Because as always, she did hers right.
I
So
know I dropped mine off in August and they took it. I dropped off all my whole house.
yeah,
At the early vote, at
Yeah,
the
at
early
the early-
vote site?
Yeah, at
You know, maybe
Midtown.
they do. I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
I'll check on it
I
because
will check that. I will check that, Keith, and call you.
no, you're not just gonna do that. I'm gonna have you on the program and then about it in detail. Okay, You, Anita, one more question for the person who wants to have the continuous absentee.
The permanent absentee ballot.
Right. Do you need a medical reason for that or a
You
hardship?
do not need a medical reason, no.
Okay.
But when you fill out the application, you do need to say, you know, I'm immobile, I'm on a wheelchair, I have COVID, you know, whatever. I'm 20 years old with lupus. I don't know if I'm going to be able to move from day to day. So you can apply for a permanent absentee ballot.
All right. I have a question just based on your presentation, Clarence.
Yes.
And you're first vice president at NAACP. What's the role of a group like the NAACP, which is nonpartisan? What do you see your role as part of this whole the whole election cycle? What's the role of the NAACP?
To try to help ensure fair voting. For instance, someone mentioned about the mayor and the polling sites that were removed or closed or whatever. Well, we saw that something had happened and we filed a complaint to the Elections Commission. So fair voting is important. Equity in voting is important. So
What about
if complaints are filed, excuse me?
I was going to ask you, what if people have gone to the polls and there's some form of irregularity? Would they contact the NAACP if they identified irregularities at the polls?
They can.
Okay.
And of course, if they petition, then we can get involved to assist them.
Okay. I need another question.
Can I just piggyback on that last question you asked? Election protection will be at the polling site to make sure that people are not being disenfranchised at the polls. And there's a 1-800 number that can be called, Our Vote, if there's any problems that arise at the polls. And there are lawyers that will be on call in case there are any problems at the polls.
There was a question. Can you explain what a provisional ballot is, Anita?
A provisional ballot is a ballot that is offered to a person who did not bring in all documents that are needed to register to vote, like proof of address. And that we don't like provisional ballots. If you can go home and get what you need and come back, that's better, because a provisional ballot is not counted until you prove your residentship or your name, whatever they're asking for that you didn't have. So it's a ballot that's not counted until you prove who you are and where you live.
Can I be a witness for more than one person on the absentee ballots?
Yes. You can,
As long as I'm 18 years old, correct?
yes.
Mhm.
Well, no, I asked that question because normally the people, those ballots are usually witnessed by people who live in the household.
Right, 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 right. And that's true. And sometimes people live in low income facilities, and the social worker that is there is sometimes a witness for everybody there. So yes, you can.
Jason, you had mentioned earlier, and I found this a little bit fascinating too when I heard this, that Miller Park and Pfizer was taken off of the list of possible places for early voting because of the fear of litigation. My understanding is, though, that they are using Lambeau Field in Green Bay. So Lambeau Field and not Miller Park.
It's the people in charge, man. I mean, at the end of the day, so they're using a parking lot out at Lambeau Field, like they're one of their villages. But the point is, they're still using it, and so, and this is where you got to understand. Like the mayor of Green Bay was in the assembly with me, so he's one of these, probably my age, a hothead, and he don't care. He hate Republicans and all that kind of stuff, and so he don't care. So he's going to do whatever he needs to do to make sure people in his area get access to vote. I understand the rationale of wanting to make sure that the votes count, because it is a game. I mean, it is a sort of, this is a war, this is chess. The problem though is that we are at a point where you can't let that stop you, right? I mean, I understand the caution, but this is one of those times where, given the pandemic, given the fact that Wisconsin is a hot zone, it just makes sense to open up a Lambeau, or not a Lambeau, but a Bucks Arena, Brewer Stadium, because now you have it just makes sense from a space. But again, you have to have the people and the volunteers who will do it, who will go there, which, I'm not going to sit there and say whether they did a good job or not. All I know is that it's sort of, when you have LeBron James out there offering $10 some thousand dollars, willing to pay for people, willing to help people get stadiums open. When the mayor of Green Bay is saying, hey, we're going to open up the Packers, the Lambeau Stadium, I don't understand how Milwaukee, the largest place in the state, the place where if anybody needs to be voting is us, I don't see why we should succumb to that fear.
Okay. There was a question about college students who live out of state. Are they eligible to vote in the election here?
Well, it all depends on the laws of the university that they go to. I know that Marquette is a private university and that you would be able to vote there, but you have to go and to some office to get the information so you can vote, and you have to prove that you are a student that your fee has been paid up, or you have a class schedule. Those are the two things that they need in order to be able to vote. And then whatever laws that govern that school, that's what they have to follow. And I don't know the laws for each and every school. I know that you can vote at MATC with your student ID, but I don't know that each university will allow you to do that.
Okay. All right.
I have a question, a piggyback question on that. Now, if a college student is signed up to participate with the absentee ballot and they're out of state at a college, how do they do their vote?
Well, are they getting the absentee ballot from their state?
Yes.
It's being sent, yeah, they can do that. They can have the absentee ballot sent here. They can vote and then they mail it back
Okay. They mail it back
to
to,
their election commission or whomever they should mail it back to. Yes, they can have an absentee ballot come to the school and they vote and mail it back to their state.
okay, so then their witness would be, say, like in Louisiana, because that's where my granddaughter goes to school at.
Mhm.
And and so their witness would have an address in Louisiana. And she sends it back to the election commission.
And she's voting in Louisiana. You know,
Yeah,
this
going
is
to
tricky.
school in
Yeah,
Louisiana.
it's so tricky because I have a niece
Anita, I
who's
think-
here and
I
she
think what
lives
she's
in,
No, I think she's asking if Wisconsin mails a ballot to her daughter in Louisiana.
oh, her daughter. It was,
Right.
No,
yeah.
She's living in Louisiana, but she wants to vote in Wisconsin.
Okay, I got you.
no,
I got you.
that's not
Have
exactly
your
right.
daughter mail the absentee ballot back to you. You witness it and then send it to the election commission.
Okay, thank you. That's what I need to know.
Okay, sorry.
My
No, that's
suggestion is not to even send it, is to take it
Yeah.
to one of those,
Yeah.
Drop boxes.
those
Mhm.
drop boxes, yes. Ms.
Yes.
Johnson, could you, provide the 800 number for the election protection?
It's 1-800-OUR-VOTE. I don't know the numbers offhand, but it's 1-800-OUR-VOTE. OUR vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is not a question, but it's just a statement, and it like kind of piggybacks off of what Mr. Fields is saying about how they try to suppress your vote. Now, I'm a voter. I vote every election. I don't care if it's for a janitor or whatever it could be. I vote every election. Well, I sent in for absentee vote ballot in April, and I didn't get it. So I was one of the people standing in the line because I thought it was that important. And then I got it in August. That went well. And then this time I didn't get it again. So, I mean, I don't know what the issue is, but you know, it's kind of disheartening, but it's not going to stop me because I'm going to make sure that my voice is heard. But it's it just validates how when they know that you are a voter and that you're going to come out and you're going to go to the polls no matter what, that they try to stop you. That's crappy.
May I ask you two questions?
Yes.
The first question is, did you apply for an absentee ballot for this election?
Yes.
And you say you did not get the ballot?
Everybody in my household got it. So
Okay,
it's
then
my
second question. Do you know how to trace your request to see where it is?
Yes,
online?
so I looked, my daughter actually looked for me.
Okay.
And she said it was mailed out on the 29th of September. But my daughter and my cousin, they got theirs back in August.
Okay.
And mine just didn't come. But
Okay, so then you have to, and I mean, you keep pounding them. You gotta keep pounding them. You call the election commission and you say, I requested it. They say it was mailed out on the 29th. I still don't have it.
Okay.
So you have to keep on them. Don't let them get away with it. Just keep calling and pounding until you get it.
Yeah, and I can tell you that also you might want to check your status. There was an issue with the spelling of my wife's name. And so she was having a problem. She had gotten it before, but this time around there was a problem. So she had to go and work it out. And they were able to work out what it was in terms of reconciling the differences in her name.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're going to really have to, especially for the bailout piece, to make sure that all your information is up to date and accurate. Now it's too late now if you need to change your address or do any kind of changes online. So either you have to call or you have to go in person to the Zeidler building, correct?
Yeah, they did send me something to say they needed to see my ID.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
that, and it's probably, have you moved lately?
Nope.
had you moved, how long have you been at your address?
25 years.
Oh, well, then you need to go to the Ziegler building and see what the problem is.
Okay.
Okay, you need to do that. Please do that, okay?
Yes.
And if you go into your chat, you can see that the election protection number has been posted. It is 1-800-OUR-VOTE, 1-800-687-8683.
Okay.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns, sermons?
I have a comment, if I may, to Jason, when you talked about the Miller Park and not Zyler, but
Brewer
what's
Station.
that thing
Pfizer.
down on downtown, the brewer.
Pfizer.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. The last I heard on the news, the reason why we can't utilize those facilities is because something to do with the date. You had to register them or something to that effect, and they said it was a conflict of the date, which, as I was listening to you, I'm kind of like, okay, and so, so what? You have one. To me, I thought it was the perfect place. You have a drive up where people could vote, and then the Pfizer where people could, I guess, do a walk-in or something. I don't understand. I mean, to me, couldn't they have contested that?
I think legally they could have, but I try to be not so jaded about all this stuff. But again, it goes to, because I've heard that, and that's what they said, that that it was because of some dates, which then begs the question: if everybody knew this, how we get the dates wrong? You know what I mean? How we have all these people who all of a sudden you mean to tell me that they just overlooked this? This is an
Exactly.
overtime? Maybe. I mean, look, I'm probably not the one to answer that question, because I think when you really want something and the political will is there, I've been in government, we will find a way to do it. But just from their own website, the reasons that they give is for the litigation suit. They don't want to get in the point where they're going to get sued. And my point is, and I've heard this from national folks, you're going to get sued anyway. I mean, so if you're going to get sued, you might as well go forward. And as Keith pointed out, why is it that we have that problem in Milwaukee, but an hour away in Green Bay, they don't have that problem? The mayor there is like, hey, we gonna do this. And so, and all across the other states, when you look at what's happening in New York, Atlanta, Cleveland, so then it gets down to a question of, do you really want to do this? And that's where I come back to, I think if they really wanted to do it, we could find a way. But I think what's happening is there's a fear that if they get sued, and I get it, right? I mean, the Supreme Court here in Wisconsin is totally one way. And while on some instances they've surprised us, when we start getting to this kind of stuff, I don't know if I have enough faith in them to do necessarily the right thing on this issue, but I could understand it. But at this point, with so much on the line, we can't leave any stones unturned. So I think we should just continue to plow through that stuff.
So my question to the NAACP, and back to you, Jason, isn't there some way we could have filed a suit, since we're talking about suing, just like whatever this group is that's suing the governor regarding the restrictions and the wearing the mask? And since the legislators wouldn't do it this time, now all of a sudden you have, I believe it's an outside organization that has stepped up and filed a suit. So I don't understand why we can't do stuff like that, or not to say we can't, but how do we pick it up and create and get that flowing? Do we necessarily need an attorney? Can we create it and then go to an attorney? I guess I'm just tired of always sitting and we're not filing anything to wake and shake these people up.
Legally, it would be somebody would have to bring the suit. Like typically the way this stuff was happening, somebody here would say, hey, I'm going to file, or I'm going to go to the NAACP. The NAACP would file what they would call an amicus brief in court against whatever organization, what have you. Yeah, it could be done. I mean, it's going to take money. You're going to need some lawyers, you know, and so it would have to be well thought out, and you would have to have some good election law kind of attorneys. But it can always be done if we really want it to be done.
But the only other hand, we're not using taxpayers' money, so it's not easy to do, as Jason said, just NAACP doing it, because you need, who's going to put up the money? Big bucks.
Yeah, so and to Mr. Nicholas's point, when you have the legislature doing all this stuff, and I mean, the money that they use is long, it's taxpayer dollars. You know, so even though they go outside, some of that stuff is, they got the money to do that. Legislature, the Dems and Republicans, the governor's office, they got the money to do these law cases.
And I agree, but I guess I was just thinking like this, whatever this organization, I'm sure they're getting, you know, PACs from somewhere. But it sounds like it's time for us to start putting some money aside and coming up with I don't want to necessarily say if it has to be a Black PAC, but it could be a poor people PAC, to start putting money aside so we can start doing these things. Because like I said, it's my understanding there's an individual entity, they're not connected with the legislation that has filed this suit.
They not connected, you know, like legally. I mean, trust me, they all know each other. And they all.
I know they're behind the scenes together. I believe that. But I guess I just found it interesting that, and I thought it was questionable that, okay, my feeling is the legislators, the ones that you pointed out on your slide, are the ones that talk to this organization to get it going, so they wouldn't have to step in and do this a second time.
Right. What you would have is, you would have a group in when it comes to Democrats, you would have like the NAACP along with the Democratic Party, some other people. So it wouldn't just all be on the NAACP. But again, if you look at the letter, and I would challenge you all to go to the City of Milwaukee Election Commission, because behind closed doors, the party is necessarily, they're not putting up too much of a fight on this either. And so, you know, it's a lot of stuff that happened that is, you know, it's why I'm retiring.
Let me respond this way too, because of what you said. The NAACP, we have sent a letter and a resolution to the national. We're trying to get a Lloyd Bobby intake and legal review initiative. We want to raise over $3 million so that we can do an endowment here so that we'd always have office space. However, if we're given the right to pursue that $3 million endowment, then we're going to need people like you to donate. Then we can do some things like that. Yes. So it's set in motion, and we're waiting to hear if they will allow us to do that or not. So any day now, we may get an answer. And if so, you'll see that we'll be soliciting monies so that we can have a lawyer that will work employment, education, housing, healthcare, and social justice. And it also will bring in money if we can get a good lawsuit and win.
Wonderful.
So we would have something like that. It's being proposed. How about that?
Good to hear.
Any other questions, observations, comments?
Keith, I would like to say that let's not overlook the photo ID. People can still go and get a photo ID so they can register to vote at the polling site. You can still register to vote. So don't think because you can't register to vote online that you can't register to vote. Wisconsin is one of the only states that will still allow you to register to vote at the polling site as long as you have proof of residence and you are there for 28 days.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just have a question relevant to getting the DMV state ID for voting.
Yes, it's a state ID,
Okay.
yes.
For now, if they don't have a birth certificate, would you please, just explain that again and how to get a birth certificate?
The birth certificate,
Yeah, through
there's a
DMV.
petition process
All right.
that people really don't know about. And a lot of times when people go in to get a state ID, they don't know the procedure. You have to take a proof of residence, your social security card, and your birth certificate. If you do not have your birth certificate and the clerk tells you, we can't help you because you don't have a birth certificate, you will say to them, but you have a petition process. Ask for that form. And they ask you things like your mother's maiden name, your father's maiden name, where were they born? It's a lot about your history that you have to put on that form. I once assisted a man whose name was wrong on his birth certificate by the midwife. It took me 6 months of research to find out that his name was wrong on the birth certificate. And I kept going back to the state DMV saying, well, we did everything you wanted us to do, because they had that man to recreate his life from the time he was born up until he was 53 years old. And he did it. He did everything. So finally, we found out that the midwife had made his name feminine instead of masculine. And the DMV told me that if I could not find a legal document with his birth name on it, that they couldn't get a state ID. Mind you, he had been in the military. He had all kind of driver's license from out of state. When the man first applied for a social security card, it had that name on there. And that was the way we were able to get him a state ID. So you have to be persistent. Tell them, I know you have a petition process, fill out that form, then they will check your birth date and the county you were born in. Once they verify that, they will not send you a birth certificate. They will send you a state ID. It still will be up to you to get that birth certificate.
So who starts this petition process? Is it the DMV? Is that where you start at?
The DMV does the petition process.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Well, if not, then I will turn it back over to Zelda, and we can do what we need to do.
Zelda, before you start, Zelda, I just want to speak to my experience of getting my absentee ballot. Can I do that? It don't take a moment.
Yes, you have to see.
Mine was very different. Quite frankly, back in the spring, it showed up in my mail. I didn't know what it was, and it looked kind of like junk mail until I opened it and I learned it was an absentee ballot. And that was like back in the spring election, by 3 weeks prior to. So I just showed up in the mail. I didn't ask for it. So, and then after that, I got, for this election, well, in that particular situation, it asked me if I wanted to, vote by mail, like for future elections, like for the November 3rd election. And so absolutely, I said yes. And so for this November 3rd election, about maybe a month or so ago, I got another a ballot in the mail. And so I voted by mail. So that was my experience with the spring election and also this fall election. So I was just wondering, can you speak to that? You know, it's just kind of like, they kind of look at your voting record and then send out, you know, ballots like that, or how do they do that?
I've been getting a lot of absentee ballots too, and I'm planning to vote in person. I don't know, it's like are they kind of pushing that towards voting absentee?
From my understanding, they were to send absentee ballots to every voter. I never got one. I never got one.
Mm.
So that could be the reason. There are a lot of entities that have come to Wisconsin, and they're doing this type of thing, and it's confusing the issue.
Yeah.
And
I
they're
get a lot
also,
of text too.
yeah.
Text
So
messages.
they're all, and that's why what I tell
Yeah.
people, if you're going to register to vote, if you're going to get an absentee ballot, go to www.myvote.wigov, because this is Wisconsin's website to get that information. All these other entities are counting how many people they got to go to their website, and then they send you to our website.
Mm.
So it's been a total mass confusion, and we got a lot of people coming into Milwaukee doing this.
My understanding is Wisconsin is not an automatic ballot state. Oregon is, I think, Colorado, Washington, where they automatically send it out. In Wisconsin, you have to request an absentee ballot. And I just an observation from the spring election. There was a lot going on, and there was a lot of people who would be, I think the deadline for the November election is the 28th. Is that the deadline to request
to request an absentee ballot? No, it's the 30th.
Yeah. Is it
October 30th. It's October 30th. October 30th is the deadline to request. Yes. That's why I said October 30th is not enough time for them to send it to you, and then you send it back, you know, so.
What happened in the spring election, because of all the uncertainty, there was a mass request. Now, if you sit up saying the 30th is the deadline, and
yes,
under circumstances, you might get it in time to vote, there was no way that many people were going to get those, because there were people doing it up to the deadline. And then we did not know in Wisconsin whether or not those absentee ballots that were postmarked for the 7th, but received after the 7th would even be counted. You know,
we did not know. But remember, they had people were standing outside the city hall taking the absentee ballots. People that didn't have a witness could get those people that were standing out. Remember that? That's why I'm saying that for that April 7th election, there was different circumstances. So, you know, that's why it was done that way. That's why I'm going to check on the other.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there that, and obviously there's a lot that's going to really factor into what, we don't even use the term voter turnout anymore. We use the term voter participation, because of the amount of people who are now either doing absentee ballots or doing early voting, which is absentee ballots. So you see the lines throughout the country. One last question, Anita, I didn't get a chance. What is the voter registration? They said the voter registration in the city of Milwaukee is down compared to 2016. Is that because the people who would have registered to vote have already registered to vote, or is there something else?
Can I tell you how I feel? I don't believe those statistics at all. Okay. I don't believe it. Okay. People, this is a presidential election. Everybody always knows about the presidential election. People are registering to vote. I have been out there. People are registering to vote. I don't believe a lot of first-time voters. I just don't, believe it. Yeah. That's the way I feel.
All right.
Eddie, should I show my screen? Patrice had just wanted me to show this information about,
Yes.
Yes, before you do, it's very important to share. There's a lot of miscommunication and miseducation about those that are being supervised under the Department of Corrections.
Thank you. I forgot that. Yes.
Yes, and I meant to put that on there. And I'm gonna let Ms. Johnson talk about it. But
okay. You don't
there,
need to,
yeah, if you can show that
right now?
while Ms. Johnson is talking,
Okay.
for people to understand the difference between a misdemeanor and a felon and what the rights are. This is specifically for ex-felons. But I'm gonna let Ms. Johnson go ahead and finish.
Okay.
And what she has on there is correct. If you are off paper, and that's the street terminology, and they keep telling me, though you can't call them felons, there's something else. If you are off paper and you are not reporting to anybody, you don't have a fine to pay, you're not under supervision, you can register to vote. You can register to vote if you are completely off paper. I met a man who had been off paper for 3 years and did not know he could register to vote. And he was like, yeah, I'm off paper. I was like, you can register. The system is quick to tell you your right to vote has been taken away from you. But they do not tell these people that they can register to vote once they're off paper. Once you have completed your probation or supervision, you can register to vote. Now, if you register to vote because your name is on a list and your name hasn't been taken off, you go to vote and they tell you you can't register to vote because your name is on as a felon. You then have to go to the election commission, and you can go to the one downtown and tell them that you're no longer a felon and they need to take your name off that list. So that's something you would have to do in person.
I would suggest that you also take in any paperwork that verifies that you discharged. If not,
Absolutely,
contact
absolutely.
Department of Corrections and ask them to provide you some type of documentation that states that you have successfully discharged.
Correct.
And I think the other thing is there's also a class out there of individuals who have charges pending, but have not been convicted of that felony. So technically, though, let's say they're at the House of Correction, or they could be down at county lockup, they're still eligible to vote, and they're still eligible to register to vote, because at this point, there has been no disposition of the charges brought against them. Is that correct?
That
That's
is
correct.
correct.
That is
And
correct.
also, Ms. Johnson, if you could talk about the misdemeanors, because if you or a family member are on supervision but have been convicted of a misdemeanor, you are eligible to vote.
That
The
is
only
correct.
time that your civil rights are taken away is if you have been convicted of a felony.
Correct. Very correct.
That's what
I
the
don't need to say
13th
anything. You
Amendment-
got it.
That's when the 13th Amendment kicks in, right?
Yes.
So correct, somewhat.
You know, one of the interesting, as an aside, you know, I have a lot of conversations about reparations. And I think it's either in the 13th or the 14th Amendment with the abolishment of enslavement, there is a clause in there saying that you cannot, those folks who are descendants cannot make claim for the enslavement. I just happen to go through it. I don't know if it's the 13th or the 14th Amendment. And so that's one of those little complicating things when people start talking about reparations. But they might want to go and check that little piece that's in the Constitution at this point. That's some trivia. Okay.
One thing I want to say, Patrice or Zelda, if you could send this through email to the people who are present on this call so that if there's any questions or anything comes up, they can also forward this on to someone else so that everybody who has been a felon and is no longer a felon can know this information. I would appreciate it.
Excellent.
So if
Well,
you don't have your email, please put your email in the chat box so we can send you a copy of this. And so our next town hall meeting that if you'd like
Do
to,
you have it, Patrice?
please, if you'd like to participate, please put your email address in the chat box. Thank you.
Let me see, I have to stop the share.
Zelda, are you there?
Oh, I copied the bottom link. Let me see if I can post that.
We'll be able to send it out. That's no problem.
Okay, thank you.
That's just more, I just put the bottom there for detailed information about the photo ID law. Yeah, if you would like a copy of that, or you could put your email in there.
You can just put in the chat, I will, or I do. Yes, me, something.
Okay. So then I would like to thank all of our panelist speakers, Mr. Nichols from the NAACP. Thank you for that history of our struggle to vote in this country. Anita, thank you. From Souls to the Polls, thank you for that valuable information. Thank you for agreeing to be on this call and to talk to us about that. Jason, thank you so much. You brought so much clarity and understanding to this whole dilemma of our voting and the need to vote. Thank you so much for that. And Zelda and Patrice, thank you for moderating and not moderating. Thank you for putting all this together and being present here and doing all that you can to make this information important to everyone.
You're welcome.
Pete, thank you so much for moderating. As usual, you do a fantastic job. So thank you for participating and making this a success.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Did I forget anybody else?
Well, thank you all for coming, everybody.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
Definitely.
Anita, I'll be reaching out to you soon.
All right.
All right.
Great.
Thank you for all your hard work and dedication
Thank you.
to our community. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jason, I'd like to reach out to you.
Please do.
Oh, okay, how should I do it?
I'll give you my, I'll put my phone number, email here, if that's fine with you.
Yes.
So Jason, do you want to share what's next for you, or it's still classified?
No, you know, so I've been doing I run a nonprofit. I have a nonprofit organization,
Okay.
Financial and Business Literacy. And I'm finishing my, what is this, 6th book. I'm playing with the title Leadership in Chaotic Times. And then I got some other business stuff that I'm doing. So I'm staying busy, and then I'm married. So that right there takes up most of my time. So
Man, I'll be so glad when you get through this, man.
Leave him alone.
47 minutes and you make
Beautiful. In the he's in the honeymoon stage.
Yeah, you know, it's been like 38 and a half minutes and you make it sound like, man. an old married man yet. Come on, bro.
Hey,
Got some real scars out here, okay?
oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong phone number, Mr. Nicholson. That's,
Yeah, if any of you have anything coming up or you want to post an event or in the chat, you know, feel free. If you something you'd want to share with us, and we can share that with our rest of our group.
And you know, I think this was such a worthwhile conversation. Yeah. Certainly, we need to. The voter education piece is just really important, and I think that certainly after the experience that we had in April, we probably want to make sure that people know as much information as possible to empower them to vote. And so hopefully, you know, you folks, Clarence and Jason, and certainly Anita, if you all want to be part of a conversation with us there on Community Voice, be more than happy to have you come in, because it's just a wealth of information. I wish more people would have been here, be able to take advantage of it.
Me too.
Yeah.
The blessing though, we have, the blessing is we have a recording of it, so we will be putting it, I do believe, Madam President, on our Facebook.
Yes.
You can share the link. I can't cut it up, but the link, somebody can get the whole thing.
Yeah, my granddaughter is in film and video. I'm going to ask her to cut it up so we can
Okay.
in different parts.
Can you, I'm not techie like that, so can y'all put the site that we have in our Facebook information?
Okay, yeah. CLAW stands for Center for Leadership of African Women's Wellness, and it's a long term, so we just say CLAW. But you can check us out on our website, which is claw.org.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess we're going to free to watch the Packers who are getting killed right now. Thank you for having us today. I did definitely very, very healthy diversion because they're getting crushed right now. So, oh my God, I did so worthwhile because if I sit there and watch that, you know, who knows.
So okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I should have had that up there first. The information about Facebook and stuff like that. I should have had that. That should have been the first.
Next time. Oh, yeah, and maybe Hetty, maybe your granddaughter. Well, I guess she's gonna do it, because I was gonna say maybe when she puts them together, she can have our information in the beginning. When she makes a title for it, also put the CLAW information.
Yeah, that would
be good.
But I was also on the Zoom chat part that should have been the first thing that we had up, that I put up there, should have been about CLAW and our email, as well as our Facebook information.
Yeah, but we're learning as we go. You guys are doing
definitely. So next time.
Hey, I'm sorry it was so hard for me to get in.
Oh,
sorry.
You were able to get in finally.
Yeah, all of a sudden I came in, but wow. All right, I'm going to go listen to the Zoom.
Okay.
All right. That sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Have a great one.
All right.